Okay, so it looks like the weather's going to be really nice for us at the weekend, so we thought we'd do a little tutorial on setting up some water play. Obviously this is aimed at younger children, nursery, preschool and reception, perhaps year 1 children, but it can be scaled up, so if our older siblings are around they might also enjoy playing and perhaps helping with setting it up as well. When we're in the woods we use all sorts of things for water play. We use a lot of water play. Water to me is the ultimate loose part. It adds an extra dimension to almost anything that you want to play with, so we use a lot of water play in our woodland sessions. We have all sorts of different containers and we use a lot of the big black tough spots that you might be familiar with from settings like nurseries and reception classrooms, but we haven't got that at home, so we're going to use things that you might have at home, so obviously you can recreate it as best you can. Any container will do. A washing up bowl used to keep my two entertained with some watering in the garden for quite some time. This is a storage tray that was under the bed, and I've just emptied the contents out of it and given it a rinse, and now we're going to use it for our water tray. So any container that you've got that can hold some water obviously is good. So we're going to look at how we can use this now to keep the children entertained for as long as possible. Obviously that is the aim of the game, and there is some learning that can be taking place as well with our water trays. So we're going to think about how to start with the setup. So I like to think of layers, giving a little bit of interest. I mean, obviously the most basic level of this is your water tray, some containers and some spoons. That's sort of level 1 really, and we'll keep children entertained for a surprisingly long period of time, and that's something that we can all do very, very easily, but we're going to try and add a little bit more to that now with some of the things that you can see. So I've just gathered some things that we might find around the house. Obviously because I am involved in teaching and outdoor learning, I perhaps have got a few more things than you might have in your houses, but just be imaginative. Anything that can go in water and will dry out at the end of it can pretty much go in your water tray, and the more random the better sometimes. I'm a massive fan of loose parts, which basically means things that you can find that children can incorporate with their imaginative play in different and novel and interesting ways. So things don't have to be in sets, they don't have to match. You'll notice that children will combine their toys in weird and wonderful ways, so we're just giving them that opportunity by giving them lots of random things to play with. So if you have a little look around what we've got some gravel here, literally just scoop that out from the garden, it can go back again at the end. We've got our rocks and shells that we collect over the years. We've got things that we collected on our walks and some other rocks and pieces of bark and things. We've got some containers, and then over here we've got some things that I've just sort of picked up. So we've got some things like these glass beads, which might not necessarily be something that you will have. Children absolutely love these. Obviously you need to be a little bit careful and make sure these things are age appropriate. Little ones, if unsupervised, these might not be suitable for, but supervised play with these with preschoolers I've done, as long as we're watching them and making sure that they're safe.
I used to think that these were little gems that were hidden in the garden.
There you go, you see, so they can be anything. You can let your imagination run wild with those. This was just a random dish of items that I found, but could be used for treasure, and we've got things like, we've got some flowers that have gone over, these are tulip petals, so anything that you can find really can be used in your water play. Okay, so first things first then, the first way that we can sort of make our water more interesting for the little ones to play with. I'm just going to fish this bug out.
Oh,
I know,
bug rescue.
we do like to do a bit of bug rescue, don't we, Molly?
Yeah.
We don't like them to drown.
Sometimes in the summer when we get the paddling pool out, there's random bugs and we shout, bug rescue, and then we go and get a spoon.
Yeah, we like to rescue the bugs if we can. So first way to make our water more interesting and more appealing to play with is nice and simple, food colouring.
Blue?
I'm going to go with blue.
Yes, I love blue.
Because it is going to link with our watery theme. Obviously any colours you like. We also do colour mixing, so you could have a tray of blue and a tray of yellow, and the children can experiment with what happens when we mix the two together. But immediately it starts to look a little bit more interesting to play with than just a tray of water. Well, there's a whisk there, so if you want to give it a whisk. mix it all in. There we go. So straight away, it looks a little bit more exciting. Now, if you wanted to, you could add some bubbles in here as well. We often add some washing up liquid.
Yeah, can I go and do that?
We might do later.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to just keep it clear for now so people can see what we're doing. But if you wanted to, you could add some bubbles and things in there. Now, Molly's asked for, what was the theme that you asked for?
The sea.
Like a sea, like a fantasy seaside theme. Okay, so we're going to start with creating a base, all right? Because at the moment we can see through the water and we can see the bottom of it, and we want to create that kind of fantasy, realistic setting for our toys. So we're going to start with adding some gravel.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, seaside.
So we're going to add our gravel to one end. Okay, now I've done that deliberately. Okay. Sorry, Molly, I didn't mean to stop what you were going to do, but I could see you were going to try and spread that out, which is fine. We can spread it out in a moment, but I've deliberately left almost like a little beachy area here. So it's up to you. You can spread this out so it covers the whole of the bottom, or we can leave it so that we've got parts of it sticking out. Do you want to spread it out then, Molly? I can see that's what you wanted to do.
It's like this.
Okay.
So it's like... But then...
So that's immediately going to give you a shallow end and a deep end.
There we go.
That's it.
It's random now.
There we go. So we could add, if we wanted to, we could add some sand to the other end. You'd need to let it settle down a little bit, but we could add some sand to the other end, so you've got sort of gravel going into sand, just to give it that extra dimension. I'm not going to do that on the video, but you can imagine if we've got some sand at that end as well. Now we're going to add some rocks and things. So Molly, do you want to just grab some rocks? That's it. We've got some bigger pebbles here. So what we're trying to do here is sort of create layers. So we're creating interest. So it's not all just one dimensional. Children love to have little cave areas or nooks and crannies where their characters can go, which helps with their imaginative play, helps them to use their imaginations and develop stories and develop that sort of imaginative play. Yeah, you can put them where you like. Now, as you can see, Molly is well past preschool, but he's still enjoying actually building this. So if you've got a mixture of ages, and you've got some older ones and some younger ones, the older ones can spend some time designing and preparing some play for the younger ones.
You can hear the sea.
And you can hear the sea, and that might be a nice activity for them to do. So we're just going to add a few more things in here, and then we'll have a look at what we're going to do next. Okay, so it's got a very rock pooly feel to it now, and we've got lots of different heights. So we've used this tall rock in the background, and some things that you might like to talk about if you are building this with the children rather than just building it for them. There are some sort of learning points that we can look at as well if you wanted to. So there's things like in the stone down here, you can see the bubbles are starting to form. So thinking about why those bubbles are forming. A lot of sort of science and investigation is about asking questions, and it's okay not to know the answer to those questions. It's important to ask them, and then we can find out the answer together. So we could talk about the fact that, especially if you've got older children that are doing this, that there are air spaces within stones and rocks, and when we put them underwater, that air is starting to escape in these bubbles where the water is seeping into the rock and pushing the air out in the bubbles. So a lot of our more porous rocks will start to form these bubbles on the top. So there is, if we're doing this sort of mindfully and carefully and slowly, there are some learning points that we can take from this kind of activity as well, even for older children. Another interesting one is to look at things that are partly submerged, and you can see that sort of the skin on top of the water, that surface tension, and it's interesting sometimes to have a look at that as well and see how the water sits around the edge of something. You can see it almost curves over, forms this skin. So looking and talking about surface tension as well could be something that you want to do with older children. But back to our imaginative play then with our younger ones. So Molly was desperate to put a few bits and pieces in when she was building this, and I've asked her to wait so we can talk about it as we do it. So we've got these items here. Now this is just a little random tray of things that we happen to find. I think these were inside. They were inside a little box or something, or a little purse of yours. From
I think they were inside a little purse.
Yeah, I think they were. So we've just got a few beads. There's some beach glass there, a shell, and some buttons and things. Now there's a random collection of items, but it could be treasure, couldn't it? Yeah. So we're going to bury our treasure. So looking for buried treasure in amongst our seascape could be a nice little activity. Okay, you can see that one of our beads sank and one of our beads floated there as well. So that might be something to think about, why some things float
into the ground.
and why some things sink. So we've got our shell floating on the top there with some treasure inside it. There we go. Yeah. We put these other beads in, maybe hide some in this little cave under here as well.
Oh,
Careful not to knock our floating treasure out. Okay, so we've got some treasure in there. We might also decide to put some of these little glass beads. So in this end, where we haven't got the gravel,
the green one.
we can put some of these glass beads in as well. So they reflect the light. We've got little rainbows on there. Oh, there's a conker gone in. So these again just add another little dimension, and they're very tactile. We absolutely love playing with these glass beads. Obviously,
I love them.
again, just be careful if you've got little ones. They are glass, and they are a potential choking hazard. So we do just need to make sure everything that we're putting in is age appropriate, and make sure the children are supervised. There we go. So here we go. So that's looking pretty magical. They look like little magical bubbles under the water, I think. And then we've also got some of these petals as well, which we thought could add another layer on the top, because these will sort of float and look fairly magical and move around in the wind.
I like the idea of that piece of bark on the top.
Oh yeah,
That
like
bit.
driftwood.
Yeah, we can go for that.
Might
Be a little
I like
boat,
how they
wouldn't
blow
it?
around.
They blow around, don't they?
Sunken boat.
sunken.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you'll get it to sink. You can try.
No, just leave it.
No.
Okay, so you can hear there's lots of language coming out of this as well. We're talking about sinking and floating. We're investigating which materials sink and which float, and if they
Really?
do float, how could we make them sink? Or if they should normally sink, how could we make them float? So there's lots of activities that can come out of this, lots of learning that can come out of just such a simple activity. I will just show you a couple of other quick things before we start adding our characters in. So these are some things that we use quite a lot with our toddlers. So these are literally lids from coffee jars. We save them because we use them for all sorts. We use them to put paint in, we use them for pouring and collecting, and they're just something that you would normally throw away. So we can add some of these in, like little boats on the top as well, for our characters to float around in. So we've got a few of those. And the other thing that we use sometimes, obviously water is quite reflective anyway, but to add another reflective quality, we sometimes use these plastic mirrors as well, which can be quite nice, and we can put them in the side. Yes, we could do, to add some reflection.
I don't want it in the water.
No, that's fine. We can add some reflection around the side as well. There we go. Okay. Some other things that we've got as well, I just grabbed some random loose items. So we've got these little wooden rings, which we could add in. They might float as well.
I'm matching them.
Okay. The more randomness you put in, the more opportunities for using our imaginations, and everything doesn't have to be in sets. It doesn't have to have a particular purpose. The idea with loose parts is that the children decide the purpose of those parts within their play. So sometimes things that you think don't belong together can provide quite rich opportunities for play. So I'm a big fan of just putting out random things and letting the children decide how they want to use them. So I think our scene is pretty much ready, isn't it? I mean, we can add to it as we go along. We might need to just think about what characters we can add in now.
I made a little shipwreck down here.
You made a shipwreck down there,
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, so we've got a little box here with some random toys in. Basically anything that's plastic and will dry can go in here. So if you've got everyone's got some old Happy Meal toys and things like that they might be able to add in. Any Lego can go in, anything that you can dry out afterwards. So we've got these little sea creatures which are actually meant to go underwater. I can't remember what they're called, but so
Ocean in my pocket, I think.
yeah, something like that. So we're going to add some of these. So we've got a little stingray, so he's perhaps going to sit on this shell down here.
Look, it's got some like air pockets on it.
Yeah, and then we've got another little stingray down here, and we've got some little tiny crabs which might go in our little dish here so they don't get lost in the bottom. There we go. And we've got a little turtle as well. And then these things, we've got some Littlest Pet Shop. We've got a little bluebird that's come from a set. We've got a penguin. The more random the better in my view, because it really gives us a chance to use our imagination to connect these characters and see how they might interact with our play.
What else is there?
Okay, so we're going to put our Littlest Pet Shop person in the little cave. And then
Crocodile!
the penguin can perhaps be sitting on a rock
Oh, I
over
hatched
here.
this from an egg.
There you go.
And the
Penguin
octopus
doesn't
is
want to sit on
guarding
there,
the
does
cave.
he? Okay, so just adding a few little characters in there already. It's started to get some storytelling, some imaginative play, and started to get things moving for us. And that's pretty much it really. You can add things in as you go along. We can add little challenges. So can we get this animal from here to here without them going in the water? So we might build a bridge, we might use something as a boat. Obviously, as we're looking at water, sinking and floating is something that we can look at quite a lot. So how can we keep this animal dry? How can we keep them out of the water? We can then move this on to perhaps some storytelling. If you wanted to look at ways of encouraging younger ones to write some simple sentences, they could start to write about what they can see in here. This could be an excellent story setting for starting some story writing.
The whale swallowed some sand.
There's lots and lots of ways that we can use this. The great thing about these particular tubs as well is they do have lids on them. So if you wanted to put the lid on it for one day and leave it set up and reopen the lid again the next day, that's definitely something that you can do.
Mummy.
There's days and days worth of play from something as simple as this. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of ways that you can set up some simple water play. Obviously we've gone with a fantasy theme because that's what was requested here, but you can do this just as easily if you've got some farm animals and some tractors, if you've got superhero toys, anything really, you can use the same principle. Just some bits and pieces from around the house and from around the garden, just put together to create a really rich, imaginative play experience. We're obviously, as you can see, we've started playing now, so I think we're going to be here for a little while. So yeah, I hope that this has given you some ideas, and we would love to see your water play over the weekend.
The boat? But then the boat can't move because the turtle gets out. So how do we get the boat to move?
Blow it.
Wait, so
Wait,
we have to wait for a gust of wind.
You could make a sail. Oh, that's it.
No, you can't move it.
Yeah, I'm not moving it. Oh no.
You are. Hey.
It's got stuck.
It's got shipwrecked.
You have to sort of steer it. No, not that way.
Well, I'll be the steering person. Yay!